Hello, everyone. This is Jody with Grace and Faith, and I'm so thankful that you are joining us today. I wanted to bring you a new series in regards to anxiety and what is anxiety. This is a topic that's sensitive to my heart because a couple years ago I realized that I suffer with anxiety, and I didn't really understand the disorder before that. I didn't really understand what the difference was between anxiety and anxiety disorder. And so over the years I guess I haven't officially been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, but I've learned enough to know that it is an issue that I deal with. And so I just wanted to bring a series to you that would cover this topic. I know when I first started realizing that maybe I dealt with anxiety, my husband and my family and friends didn't really know how to support me. And I've gotten a lot of questions. And I know before I struggled with this, it was something that I never really understood. And so I just wanted to bring a series to you that would help explain to you what it is and what it's like for the person suffering with anxiety and how you can support your loved ones. And so before we can talk about how you can support them, we need to talk about what is anxiety. So that way, once you understand anxiety, further down in our series, we will talk about more about how you can help them and support them more. So anxiety is actually a natural response from the body when you're faced with a stressful situation. Everybody deals with anxiety in some form, right? And so if you're getting ready for a job interview or a big test or something, we all have that natural response of, just getting nervous and having that anxiousness inside of you. And it's your body's natural way of dealing with an uncertain circumstance or situation. And so that's a normal anxiety that we all have. It's built into our bodies, and it helps us be more alert and ready for that circumstance that we're about to confront, whatever it may be. Having an anxiety disorder is when sometimes that anxiety becomes, my word that I like to use with my husband is I become overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with anxiety. It's not like a typical what most people would deal with anxiety. It just becomes overwhelming for me, and it can help, the way it overcomes people is it helps you not be able, or it stops you from being able to concentrate well. Hence, right now, my anxiety is kind of high doing this series. So it prohibits you from being able to concentrate well. You don't sleep as well. Sometimes talking to others or even interacting with others is hard for you when your anxiety is raised. And so an anxiety disorder is more when that anxiety takes over your circumstances. It almost becomes debilitating, and you feel like you can't live your life like you would want to be. I don't know about you, but for me growing up, I always had a certain picture of what anxiety disorders looked like in somebody else. And that picture for me was always somebody that was super paranoid and would shut themselves in their house, and they wouldn't talk to people, and they, they just stayed in their house and were this super paranoid type person. And while that is an extreme case of an anxiety disorder, it's not what most people deal with as those people who are dealing with anxiety on an average person who has an anxiety disorder. So what are the symptoms of someone who is suffering with an anxiety disorder? There is no one, picture perfect scenario of what someone who's struggling with anxiety looks like. It's different for each and every person. There are some certain symptoms that many people will say is part of your anxiety. Obviously, the fear. Most people who have anxiety disorders deal with excessive fear. My husband, sometimes I'll have this fear of whatever it may be, someone coming into our house or my kids getting kidnapped while playing in the backyard. And while that might be a normal fear for somebody, mine becomes an excessive fear that overwhelms me. It goes back to that word, right? I'm constantly in a fear of worry and dread of what might happen. Sometimes things like your heart may start palpitating quickly, your hands get sweaty, you have trouble sleeping, you become very tense. I can always tell when I'm anxious because, you get that tension in your neck. Sometimes it leads to headaches and a lot of fatigue because your whole body is constantly tense and you're always worrying. Your mind never shuts off, and it constantly is this like, what about this and what about that? And you're always trying to prepare for the next worst scenario. You want to be prepared for that. And so your body is always tense. And so you're often very tired because you're always in a motion of chaos, of trying to prepare of what's next. Like I said before, trouble concentrating. It can also lead to dizziness. If you're in like a real high mode of panic, your breathing starts to become shallow, and you start to kind of get into your own world, and so that can also cause dizziness. For me, the first time I ever, looking back, like the first time I think I ever remember dealing with like an anxiety, like when it first started triggering that I might be dealing with an anxiety disorder, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just had this horrible feeling that something bad was about to happen. Now, I know you might be saying like, that's this, I do this sometimes. And like I said, everybody deals with some anxiety to a point. But some people, it becomes their life, right? Like it becomes overwhelming in their life. And so that's when you have to learn with ways on how to cope with it. But for me, that night, I woke up with this overwhelming sense that something was really bad about to happen. And I could not control my thoughts. I was so scared. And I woke my husband up. Like I was crying. I was shaking. I felt sick. And it was like that. I felt the same way in that moment as I did years ago when I got a phone call about my dad having a heart attack. That feeling when you get the phone call that something really, really bad happened and it just makes you sick and it makes everything inside of you like someone just punched you in the gut and you just want to cry and you kind of feel frozen of like, what is happening? That's how I felt that night. I woke up and I was just frozen that something bad was going to happen. Nothing was going on. Like there was no stress in our life. There was nothing. I just woke up that way. And so like for me, since that was the first time it happened, I was like, oh my gosh, like that, it's a premonition, right? Like something's going to happen. And so I was from that point on for a while, I was on a constant alert of what's happened, where's the bad thing coming from? Like what is it going to be? And so it brings even more anxiety because nothing ever happened. And then I kept thinking, okay, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And it began to happen more and more to me, to the point when that's when I realized, wait a minute, I might be dealing with an anxiety disorder. There's actually another scenario or another situation that happened that I was like, oh, we really have an issue, but I'm saving that story for another time. You'll have to come back later for that one because while it was a very terrifying moment in my life, it was also one of the most humiliating but funniest story looking back. But anyways, we'll move on and you can catch that story later. Something that you might be asking is like, what causes anxiety disorders? And that's a good question, but there's really no specific causes. If you are struggling with anxiety, just know that it's not your fault. You're not doing something that causes you to do that. Like we can talk about some things down the road, like how to retrain your thinking and things like that. But the initial part of anxiety, of that overwhelming anxiety, it's not your fault. It's not necessarily something that you do. While there is no specific cause for this, there are some situations or things that have happened in the people that have triggered it. Such as like trauma in a childhood or even adulthood. I honestly think some of mine happened from some of the situations where like I miscarried or things like that. Stress due to illness, stress just in life, you become overwhelmed with stress. Some people's personality you're just more inclined to be an anxious person. That was me growing up. I've always kind of been a worrier. And also if it runs in your family, if you have a lot of people in your family who have anxiety, that is more likely that you might have it as well. And so that's also the case with my family. We also have some of that as well. So those are some of like the possible causes, not necessarily the cause, but you might be able to look at some of those situations to trace back, like where did this could have started or what is the underlying issue. If you have an anxiety disorder or if you know someone who does have a disorder, while there is times when our anxiety will just rise for no reason. For like the other day I woke up and my anxiety rose. My whole family was home and I was working on the computer and we were doing school and we had, everybody was doing stuff and nothing was bad. Nothing was wrong. Everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I just got overwhelmed. Like my anxiety rose and I was like, I can't, I got to move. I can't sit here. And so I removed myself. I told my husband I'm taking myself to time out. And I have some techniques that I use that I will be sharing with you later in the series on how I dealt with or how I continue to deal with my anxiety. And so I came upstairs and I was doing some of those things to calm myself down. And then I was able to go back down with my family. But there was nothing that triggered me. My anxiety just rose. But if you deal with it, or if you have a loved one who deals with it, they can begin to start to realize some things do trigger them to be more anxious. For me, like being in large crowds where everybody's like around and I'm not really sure of the situation, that's a huge trigger for me. If you're in a stressful relationship or you have life stresses, like your finances are not doing well, or you have a job change or job uncertainty, illnesses, your kids, new situations, things like that could be triggers for everybody or for certain people. And so as you're working through this disorder and trying to navigate through it, you might want to keep a journal of things that may have happened before or are happening around them that may be your trigger. And it might not be one, it might be a couple of things. For me, I know when like lack of sleep, there's certain times that I don't get as much sleep and I feel that my anxiety actually raises during that time. So I hope this is a little bit helpful for you to understand what anxiety is and just the kind of like picture it. We will, in the next series, in the next part of this series that I'm going to post, we're going to cover things such as how to, strategies that I talked about that I do, strategies that I use to help me navigate life with anxiety. I'm going to do a post on how, as a spouse or a loved one, you can support your loved one with this disorder. We have a lot of awesome things coming to you that I hope you find valuable. And so I hope this was helpful for you. If so, feel free to share this video with someone that you think might be helped and find this value in this. And I look forward to coming to you next week, or not next week, but in my next series to talk about this subject of anxiety. I hope you guys have a great and blessed day.